Well, America, get ready for some very big changes. From climate change to foreign policy to immigration and more, Joe Biden is set to begin reversing course from the past 4 years.
If he takes office, the former vice president is reportedly planning to sign a series of executive orders overturning President Trump's policies. CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy has the details.
America's back.
If elected, the 46th president plans to reverse several of President Trump's policies by executive orders.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
But Biden wants to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord.
Climate change and climate warming, global warming, is an existential threat to humanity.
The former VP wants net zero emissions by 2050 and proposed $2 trillion in clean energy and infrastructure spending.
We will be today terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization.
Again, Biden plans to reverse that move. He also wants to rejoin the Iran nuclear deal as long as the regime comes back into compliance.
Iran has a robust, impressive ballistic missile system that can deliver a nuclear warhead, and now they're very precise, and now they have what they call a missile train where they can fire multiple ballistic missiles at one time. And even Israel, with probably the world's best anti-missile system, may not be able to hit all those incoming missiles.
Iran claims it would reduce its stockpile of uranium if Biden lifts sanctions on Tehran, which Iran's foreign minister suggests could be done through 3 executive orders. Biden also aims to use executive powers in these areas, repealing Trump's travel ban from Muslim countries like Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen, reinstating the Dreamers program, which allows kids of undocumented immigrants to remain in the U.S., and undoing Trump's 2017 order banning transgender individuals from the military. In a Biden administration, they would serve openly in the armed forces. Now, Biden's team is planning the EO route in case the Senate control stays in Republican hands, making legislation a challenge. We won't know that outcome until early January. Ben Kennedy, CBN News.
Well, get ready for big changes. This is just sort of the beginning, if you will. One of the current concerns I have is the World Health Organization. The documentation is quite clear that they allowed China to cover up, and they allowed China to make sure the world did not have the sources of the pandemic, and they've admitted that now in the early months of this. You go back to January, February, and March, and they were praising China at the same time, enabling China to cover it up. They admitted it, but nobody seemed to pay attention to that. And for us to say, well, we're willingly going to get back into a organization that said, well, by the way, we lied to you about the biggest health crisis in the world. That literally makes no sense. Why in the world will we ever support that? We need to get the source of COVID, how it happened. We still don't have honesty out of China as to what really happened in Wuhan. And that, I think, is necessary. So that's just one area. Here's one that I hope, if there is a new administration, I hope they take very seriously. Go back to 1994 and the crime bill of 1994, which if Biden is the president-elect, well, he voted for that back in 1994. That has led us to be one of the most incarcerated nations in the world. Can we reverse that? And can we recognize that that crime bill sparked horror within the African-American community, where 35% of African-Americans aged 18 to 35 today have some kind of relationship with the criminal justice system. They're either in jail or on parole or under indictment, and it's a disproportionate impact on the African-American community. My hope is that we can finally see some change to that and stop being a police state and stop incarcerating people at a rate that no other country in the world has. Well, in other news, President Trump is still contesting the election. So why is he giving the go-ahead for the transition process? And what are we learning about Joe Biden's first batch of cabinet nominees? Well, John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. Joe Biden is naming several members of the Obama administration for key posts. Meanwhile, even though President Trump is still fighting it out in the courts, he says the transition process should begin for the good of the country. CBN's Jenna Browder reports.
After weeks of legal battles, the Trump administration has given the go-ahead to the federal government to begin the transition process for Joe Biden's team. But the president is clear he is not conceding the election. The GSA ascertaining Monday Biden is the apparent winner of the election. This opening the door for the transition process and allowing his team to meet with federal agencies to prepare for Inauguration Day.
It would make it a lot easier if the president were to participate.
And now it appears he is. President Trump tweeting he recommended the GSA begin the process because, quote, it is in the best interest of our country, adding that he'll, quote, keep up the fight as he contests the election. This after the Trump team suffered another legal setback Monday, Michigan certifying its results, giving Biden a win.
So do you expect Republicans to put up any significant roadblocks to your nominations?
Are you kidding me?
Meanwhile, Biden is starting to announce his cabinet nominees, many of them former members of the Obama administration. He's expected to name former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen as the first woman to be Treasury Secretary, and is also nominating the first female Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. At Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas would become the first Latino director. Plus Antony Blinken as Secretary of State and John Kerry in a top climate position.
3 words, a safe establishment process.
CBN Chief Political Analyst David Brody says the Biden team is staying in the middle.
And they're going to make sure that folks that Biden trusts and are not far left, well, John Kerry's kind of far left, but a lot of them are going to be more down that center left lane, and I think that's what you're going to see.
And Inauguration Day is January 20th, now less than 60 days away. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Well, despite a rise in COVID-19 cases and warnings from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, many Americans are traveling this Thanksgiving weekend, although it's nowhere near the normal levels of holiday travel. The TSA reports it has screened more than 3 million people at the nation's airports in recent days. That's less than half the number of people who flew this time last year. Americans apparently heeding the plea of health officials to stay home for the sake of higher-risk family members.
We definitely do not want to see Thanksgiving family get-togethers be Christmas family funerals.
Meantime, AstraZeneca is the third drug maker to announce its COVID vaccine is showing promising results, up to 90% effective. This as Pfizer filed its FDA application for emergency use authorization Friday for its vaccine. Moderna is expected to follow soon. The chief scientific advisor for Operation Warp Speed says he believes the first vaccinations could come by mid-December.
With the level of efficacy we have, 95%, 70% or so of the population being immunized would allow for true herd immunity to take place. That is likely to happen somewhere in the month of May.
That is promising news. For more on this story, let's go back to Gordon.
Well, CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson is with us for more on the vaccines. And Lori, let's go a little deeper on distribution. How many doses are ready and how quickly can they be distributed?
Gordon, between Pfizer and Moderna, and it is believed that both of those vaccines, they're very similar to the messenger RNA type of vaccine. We expect that the FDA is going to issue an emergency use authorization for both, probably around December 10th. That's in about 2 weeks from Thanksgiving. And both vaccines are ready to go. They're ready to be distributed. So as soon as the FDA issues that emergency use authorizations, those those vaccines can be distributed to all of the various states depending on their population. So obviously Connecticut wouldn't get as many as, say, Texas, for example. And then the CDC is going to say exactly who gets the vaccine first. There are 40 million doses, but as you know, Gordon, that means 20 million people will get vaccinated because each person needs 2 shots. And it's expected that the CDC will say that frontline healthcare workers are going to be the very first people who get them. And then after that, people who are older, who also have pre-existing conditions, several complications, perhaps those who are living in nursing home and assisted living will get theirs after that.
Well, frontline workers should get it. Let's dig into the messenger RNA vaccine and try to dispel fears. My assumption is they don't have any fetal tissue lines in them. So that's correct.
That is correct.
Yeah. And the second is I keep hearing, it keeps coming back, that somehow the vaccine is going to have some chip implanted in your body. These chips are just to track the vial, not the person, and it just lets the CDC know when the vial has been used and where it's been used. Is that correct?
Exactly. That is, and I'm so glad you're dispelling this because there are a lot of conspiracy rumors floating around on the internet, on social media, and some other places too. And so you're right. It's sort of like a barcode, but the key is it's not in the serum. It is on the packaging because it's very important to keep track of where these vaccines were distributed because, as I mentioned, you get one and then 3 weeks later you get the other one and your immunity isn't fully in force until a month after that first one, so 1 week after that second one. So we're talking about these 20 million people who are supposedly going to be getting their vaccines in the mid-December aren't going to really have that robust immune response until the middle of January.
Let's turn to treatment. Regeneron, I believe that's what the president was able to take and bounce back so quickly from this. Has that now been approved? And if so, what are the uses for it and who can get the treatment?
Well, you're right. This is the Regeneron antibody treatment was what President Trump received when he recovered so quickly. He received 2 other pharmaceutical drugs at the same time that have also been given emergency use authorization. And this Regeneron antibody treatment is the second antibody treatment to be given emergency use authorization. We saw this with the Eli Lilly one a few weeks ago. And so this antibody treatment is really designed for people who are in the early stages of the virus, who are at risk of being hospitalized. So in other words, this is designed to keep people out of the hospital because what it does is it's an infusion and it infuses antibodies into a person right away so that they don't have to wait for their own body to make the antibodies. And a lot of these people don't make enough antibodies, and this is where they run into trouble. So there are about 80,000 doses now. In January, should have about 300,000 doses. That's really not that many when you consider we have a population of 350 million people.
All right. Well, Lori, thank you for your insights.
My pleasure.
In other news, 2 major typhoons struck the Philippines this month. The 2 massive storms swept through 1 week apart, leaving thousands homeless and without food and water. Although some victims live in remote areas, CBN's Operation Blessing made the rugged journey to bring them relief. Lucille Tolucin reports.
Rosalinda Lucero told CBN News, "Our abaca crops and the coconuts are all gone. Where will we get food? Every time I see a helicopter, I wave and shout for help, but they don't see me." Rosalinda is among the thousands who lost their homes when Typhoon Goni hit their town in the Bicol region. She is worried because she has nothing left to feed her grandchildren. It's been a week since Goni struck, but they have not received any assistance because their village is hard to reach. With the military's help and coordination with the local government, an Operation Blessing team traveled to Rosalinda's village, crossing rivers to bring the remote village much-needed food, hygiene kits, and prayer.
We want to let them know that they are not forgotten, they are not left behind. Operation Blessing had the heart to come here to let them know that we love them. Jesus loves them.
Rosalinda says she's grateful because finally her cries for help have been heard. However, after only a few days of good weather, another strong typhoon hit the Bicol region and other parts of the country.
Barely recovering from the devastation brought about by Typhoon Goni, the people here are bearing the brunt of another strong typhoon, Vamco. Thank God Operation Blessing has sent a team in advance, prepared to give immediate assistance to the victims of this storm.
Operation Blessing teams are also conducting disaster relief efforts in Metro Manila and other provinces that have also been directly hit by Typhoon Vamco. They will be distributing food, mats, blankets, hygiene kits, and drinking water to suffering typhoon survivors. Lucille Telusen, CBN News, Camarines Norte, Philippines.
I lived in the Philippines for 5 years. I went through several typhoons. Some areas are known as Typhoon Alley. I even went through a super typhoon. I haven't seen any devastation like what I've seen, the pictures, the video that's come back. Whole towns underwater, people without food, without water. But here's the good news. Because of you, because of your faithful giving, Operation Blessing Philippines is able to be on the ground to provide much needed relief. If you want to be part of the relief effort, if you want to let your voice be heard to say, we care for you, we love you, we want to help you in the middle of this disaster, you can call us, 1-800-700-7000, say, I want to give to the Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can also write us, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Or you can text, if you can memorize these letters, OBDR, which stands for Operation Blessing Disaster Relief. Text the letters OBDR to 71777. So either way you do it now. People are in need, and they need our help. 1-800-700-7000.